Hey there, my name is Zain Yacoub. I've built and sold 2 companies by the age of 24 years old. I currently co-own 3 different businesses, mainly in the marketing industry, and the combined revenue of all my companies is over $3.5 million a year. I've built and managed teams of over 75 people and scaled several of my companies from $0 to $150,000 a month before 18 months. I want to talk today about how I got started and how I went from a sophomore in college, building my first company and getting acquired before I graduated. Most people, their plan, especially when they go to business school, is to, work hard, get a job, climb the corporate ladder. That was supposedly my reality. My dad was encouraging me to go into consulting, and I was looking at sales jobs and all these other things. But when I was in college, I decided to take a different path. Instead of just focusing on my classes, I went all in and built my own business. And so as a sophomore, I started a company called Advisor Appointments, and I saw a need for financial advisors, specifically mid-market, who are looking to generate more business for themselves to essentially market for them. So I created a marketing company called Advisor Appointments, where we did LinkedIn marketing for financial advisors out of my dorm room. Basically, that was the best decision of my life. Fast forward 2 years later, I was making, well over $50,000 a month from that business, and we got acquired as I was graduating. And so the best part, I did this while still getting my degree, proving that you don't have to choose between education and entrepreneurship. And I'm making this video today to share my full journey, how I scaled and built that business, and then how I built another one on top of that was 3 times as big, all before I turned 25. And so I'm hoping that you can learn from some of my experiences, get inspired for your own journey, and hopefully use this to help you achieve the life you always wanted, even if you're still in school. Early life, I actually started my entrepreneurship journey at 14. So I was doing social media for local businesses in my area. I was born in the DC, Maryland area. So after football practice every day, I'd go knock on doors of local businesses in the DC, Maryland area. And I'd say, hey, you want a website? Hey, you want social media? I had no idea what I was doing. I actually saw a Tai Lopez video, and it was like, hey, start a social media business. And so I was like, okay, sounds good. Kind of a full circle. 2 weeks ago, just randomly, I was in LA and I actually met him, and I got to tell him in person how much he had helped me with my journey. But at the time I was 14, I had no idea what I was doing. So I started my first business, 14, 15, 16, hustling, trying to build websites, charging $15 an hour. That's essentially what got me into entrepreneurship. When I was 18, I did a TEDx talk, and at the TEDx, I talked about my experience building my first business and what that was like. And, it really took hundreds of rejections before I got my first client, especially because I didn't know what I was doing. But I would say the younger you start is better, right? It's like football. If you are a football player starting at age 10, by the time you get to high school, you're already ahead of your peers. It's the same with business and entrepreneurship. So that's the mindset that I have. So basically at 18, I got my first real gig, which was to become the interim CMO for a large kitchen and bath remodeling company. That taught me a lot about actually growing medium-sized companies and not just small companies, managing social media, managing teams, paying contractors, design, all of that stuff. And so, so Advisor Appointments, I started when I was 19. I built that from $0 to $50,000 a month in about 18 months. We ended up exiting in 2021 to an ex-Liberty Mutual executive. And so after that, I essentially spent my senior year of college. I was traveling the world. I was doing a lot of fun things. And around the time I was graduating, I started a new company. And that company was called ThinkFish. The fish is short for funding is hard. And so basically what happened is after I sold my first company, I had my first experience of success. I had hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash in the bank, and I started investing the money. So I invested in some startups, I invested in some real estate, I invested in some crypto, I did a lot of different things. But what I saw was, as an investor, there was a lot of challenges that startups had with raising money, and I was doing that on the other side of the table. So I decided, hey, why not start a business to help address that need? So I created ThinkFish with the objective of helping connect startup founders to investors. And basically what I did is I spent 6 months reaching out to investors on LinkedIn saying, hey, I have deals of people who are interested in raising money, and I'd love to share them with you. So I organically built a network of over a couple hundred investors in that period, every single day sending messages, having phone calls. And then about in early 2022, that's when I actually launched ThinkFish, and I started reaching out to startups and saying, hey, I have investors, I'd like to introduce you to them. And so what I did is I combined my personal network, which I had built out organically, with cold outreach to essentially act as an outsourced investor relations firm for these startups, mainly pre-seed to Series A. So we were going to the startups and saying, hey, we'll help you find investors. And then when they worked with us, we'd make warm introductions, and then we'd use their LinkedIn accounts to reach out to their target investors as a full service marketing agency with LinkedIn. And so essentially we were able to build that up very quickly to about $150,000 a month within about 18 months. And then we got acquired in August of 2023. So relatively quick, like my first company start to acquisition. I learned so many lessons along the way. I built a team to over 50 people. We had a big outsourced staff in the Philippines, and the US was for our sales. And that's basically how we built that. And, it was a lot of challenges building that business, learning the ins and outs of capital raising, figuring out, how do I go from, point A to point B to point C. And so, that was just an incredible experience all across the board. And I was fortunate to have been able to exit that. Some of the lessons I learned on my journey, so there's definitely a lot of things that I've learned in the process, and I'll share my lessons and I'll go through them one by one. First lesson that I'd like to share is to outsource work that's not critical. So if you're doing things in your day-to-day that aren't clearly driving the business forward, look to outsource. If they're not things that you need to do, you shouldn't be doing them. So I hired a 40+ person team for operations and management, which is what enabled me to outsource everything except what I love doing, which is sales, right? So focus on what you love doing, because that's the most scalable way to grow your business. The next thing that I've learned is balancing short-term and long-term revenue goals for financial stability. So I think when people start a business, there's a lot of different objectives that they have. Sometimes, and it really depends on the founder. Some founders are very long-term focused. Hey, I want to build the next Facebook. We're not going to make money for 7 years. When we do, I'm going to be a billionaire, and that's your goal. And some people are like, I just want to make money in the bank now. It's all about now. It's all about today. And I think the right combination is really somewhere in the middle. You can't be too focused on the long term, and you can't be too focused on the short term. And that makes a very big difference when you're actually creating your strategy for growth. The way I do it is I plan out 1 quarter at a time. I have a quarterly goal and a yearly goal, and I always run those projections, and that helps me stay balanced with my goals for my own business. The next thing is to focus on specific marketing strategies rather than 100 different strategies. So what my company was able to do was use LinkedIn to generate leads for our own business, and that's what helped us really scale. So what that enabled us to do was only focus on LinkedIn outreach. We're spending a couple grand a month and 20xing our money. Now, a lot of companies, marketing agencies, B2B service, SaaS, tech, whatever you are, want to try Facebook ads, Google ads, Meta, well, that is Facebook now, but pretty much everything under the sun, right? But $500 here, 500 here, 1,000 here, 1,000 here, influencers here, right? And before you know it, you've wasted a bunch of money. You haven't really found the results because you're spread too thin. So find one thing that works and go all in. The next thing is keep your product simple and effective for rapid growth. So what I mean by that is don't try and create 10 different products and sell those all and see what works the best. Focus on one thing that really works and use that to go from 0 to 100K, and you're going to have the most success that way. Next thing is add value to your clients in the sales process instead of focusing on closing. So a lot of people when they're in sales, because being an entrepreneur is simply just sales, right? So a lot of people when they're in sales, they're like, hey, how do I go from, how do I close this deal? And they're really, how do I put it? They're not very transparent with their customer, and they don't really tell the customer what the customer needs to know to make an informed decision, and they keep a lot of mystery on the table. Hey, if you work with us, you're going to make a lot of money and yada yada, but they're not really going into the process. They're not sharing any tips or tricks that are important in the process for the customer to know. That's why we go above and beyond in the sales process to really educate the customer, make sure they know what they're getting into, and make sure they understand the pros and cons of working with us so they can make an informed decision. We're not the type of company, none of my businesses are, where we go to people and say, hey, buy from us today, or that's it. We're very much softer approach with how we do that. And then the next thing is offer products or services that meet real demands. So don't just create a product because you think it's a cool product. Create a product based on working backwards. What do your customers actually want? And then build something to sell to that audience. That involves customer interviews and feedback before you go out. My companies were lead generation for financial advisors. Financial advisors, what do they want? More business. So we address that need. Next one, startups raising money. What do startups want? Money. Address that need, right? Very simple, black and white, built out the business model frameworks, very straightforward. So a lot of people are trying to create, this HR tech for this industry industry because it looks cool and they're spending a bunch of money and time on the product, and before you know it, no one actually wants to buy it. So that's very important to figure out. The last thing is just make sure that you are not sacrificing your ethics as you build the business. It becomes very easy after you start making tens of thousands of dollars a month or hundreds of thousands of dollars a month or millions of dollars a month to say, hey, what's the difference between doing this, and blurred lines, become very apparent as you're making a lot of money. And so it's really, really important to stay true to yourself, your stakeholders, and your business partners, and operate within all lines completely ethically and legally. It's important to have a lawyer you can call anytime that you have any questions, especially if you're operating in industries that are heavily regulated, like for me, capital raising, where the laws can be changing at any given time. So that's very, very important when going into business. So those are some of the lessons that I would share. My preference, if I was a new entrepreneur trying to start a business, is I'd look at starting a digital marketing business, because you can get the experience and you can close revenue pretty quickly, versus with other businesses, it takes a lot longer, and you might not get your first revenue in 6 months, a year. I like businesses where I can make money next week. And I found that long-term really figures itself out with the more short-term revenue focus. And that's why I said balance it. But I like to generate businesses. I like to do businesses that have the capacity to make money now, because that usually figures out the long-term by itself. Every business's problem is simply just getting more money in the door. If you can get more money in the door, it's going to solve most of your problems long-term. So think about that. And also a completely different model is going the VC route, raising money. That's a whole journey in and of itself. And I wouldn't recommend doing something like that until you've actually had some short-term businesses that have been successful, because your first business is most likely, statistically speaking, not going to be that home run billion-dollar company where you raise 100 million. So think about that when you get into your first business. The last thing I'd say is, between all my companies, I'll just name the companies that I co-own and you can look them up. I'm co-founder at a company called StratDev, CEO at a company called GrowthCo. I still retain equity in ThinkFish, which is the company I sold. I have a company called Smart Media Management where we do marketing for the kitchen remodeling business. I have multiple other smaller businesses as well. Like I said, we're doing combined revenues in the millions of dollars per year, over $4 million a year if you analyze all the businesses. And I was able to build these all by myself before 25, applying these lessons, figuring out what's working. There's been 20 businesses that have failed for every one business that works. So you need to be able to persevere and understand that there's always light at the end of the tunnel, but you have to keep going and you have to apply all these principles and frameworks to every aspect of your life. And you have to ignore the people that are going to tell you, oh, corporate's better or this and that. And you have to stay away from the crowd, because the crowd is following one path. And in order to be successful, you have to go a different way. There's no it's and or but about it. You have to take the first step in your life to change for the better. No one will push you to take that first step except for you. And I hope this video helps inspire you to take the first step, so you can see someone like myself who doesn't come from a ton of money, who is able to scale and build 2 companies, generates millions of dollars a year with my businesses. If I was able to do it before 25, so can you. The last thing I'll mention is, if you're an aspiring entrepreneur or you already have your own business and you're looking to grow or scale, feel free to contact me, because I can help with that. Or if you're just looking to share ideas and get some feedback, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can just look up my name, and I'm always happy to give some feedback free of charge to help you across your entrepreneurship journey as well. I really appreciate you taking the time to hear me out today. I hope some of my journeys was inspiring and my lessons were helpful for you. And I look forward to talking to you again soon. Cheers.